In a quiet suburban neighborhood where rows of neatly trimmed lawns and colorful flower beds lined the streets, Mark Thompson lived what seemed like an ordinary life. He shared his home with his wife Lisa and their two children, Emma and Jake. The family was known for being friendly but low-key, rarely stirring up trouble or drawing attention to themselves. However, there was one thing about their house that set it apart from the rest: a stunning backyard pool. The pool wasn't just any ordinary pool. It was an oasis of relaxation and joy, surrounded by lush greenery, vibrant flowers, and carefully placed outdoor furniture. String lights hung above, casting a warm glow during evening swims, while comfortable lounge chairs invited anyone to sit back and soak in the peaceful atmosphere. To Mark and his family, the pool was more than just water. It was their escape from the stresses of everyday life. Whether it was weekend barbecues, lazy summer afternoons, or late-night dips under the stars, the pool brought them closer together. But not everyone appreciated the tranquility of Mark's backyard paradise. Across the street lived Karen Miller, a woman who had earned herself the nickname HOA Karen among the neighbors. Karen was the head of the Homeowners Association, HOA, a role she took very seriously, perhaps too seriously. She prided herself on enforcing every rule, no matter how minor, and often inserted herself into situations where her involvement wasn't necessary. Her sharp tongue and knack for drama made her both feared and disliked by many in the community. Karen had always kept a close eye on Mark's property, especially the pool. From her perspective, anything as extravagant as a private swimming pool should automatically qualify as a communal amenity. She argued that since the pool could be seen from the street through gaps in the fence, it somehow belonged to everyone in the neighborhood. Never mind that the pool was entirely within Mark's property line and shielded by tall hedges. Karen believed its visibility alone gave her, and others, the right to use it. At first, Karen's complaints were subtle. She'd casually mention at HOA meetings how nice it would be if Mark opened his pool for neighborhood gatherings. "It's such a beautiful space," she'd say with a sly smile. "Wouldn't it be wonderful if everyone could enjoy it?" Other residents nodded politely, but most knew better than to entertain Karen's ideas. They understood that her suggestions weren't really about community spirit. They were about control. Mark tried to brush off Karen's comments, assuming they'd fade away if he ignored them. But Karen didn't give up easily. Her remarks grew louder and more persistent. At one meeting, she proposed creating a new rule requiring all pools visible from public spaces to host quarterly community swim days. When other members pushed back, pointing out that such a policy would infringe on personal property rights, Karen doubled down. She accused Mark of being selfish and anti-community, claiming his refusal to share his pool went against the spirit of neighborliness. As the months passed, Karen's behavior escalated. She began sending formal letters to Mark on behalf of the HOA, demanding explanations for why he hadn't yet opened his pool to the public. Each letter came wrapped in layers of passive-aggressive language, hinting that failure to comply might result in penalties or fines. Mark found these communications frustrating, but he remained calm. He responded professionally each time, citing the HOA's own guidelines, which clearly stated that private pools were exempt from public access requirements. Still, Karen refused to back down. She started showing up uninvited at Mark's front door, armed with petitions signed by a handful of neighbors who either genuinely supported her cause or simply wanted to avoid conflict. One afternoon, she arrived holding a clipboard and wearing her signature smug expression. "Mark," she said sweetly, though her tone dripped with condescension, "I think you're misunderstanding the situation. This isn't about you, it's about fairness. Everyone deserves a chance to enjoy something as luxurious as your pool." Mark sighed, leaning against his doorway. He glanced over at Lisa, who stood nearby shaking her head in disbelief. "Karen," he replied firmly, "my pool is on my property. I pay for its upkeep. I ensure it's safe for my family, and I have every right to decide who uses it. If you want a pool, maybe you should consider installing one yourself." Karen bristled at his response. Her smile faltered, replaced by a scowl. "We'll see about that," she muttered, before turning on her heel and marching back to her house. Little did Mark know this encounter marked the beginning of a much larger battle, one that would test his patience, creativity, and determination to protect his family's sanctuary. For now, life continued as usual. The Thompsons enjoyed their pool, blissfully unaware of the storm brewing just across the street. But deep down, Mark couldn't shake the feeling that Karen wouldn't let this go anytime soon. Something told him she was planning her next move, and whatever it was, it wouldn't be pretty. Karen's determination to claim Mark's pool as a public amenity only grew stronger with each passing day. Her initial polite requests had failed, and her attempts to guilt him into submission hadn't worked either. But Karen wasn't the type to give up easily. In fact, setbacks only fueled her resolve. She began ramping up her efforts, determined to make Mark's life as difficult as possible until he caved to her demands. At first, she escalated her complaints during HOA meetings. No agenda item was safe from her sharp tongue or thinly veiled accusations. Whether the topic was tree trimming regulations, holiday decorations, or parking restrictions, Karen somehow managed to steer the conversation back to Mark's pool. "We're supposed to be fostering a sense of community," she'd say, her voice dripping with faux concern. "But how can we do that when some people refuse to share their resources? It's not fair to the rest of us." Her words struck a nerve with some residents, especially those who didn't know Mark well. A few neighbors started whispering behind his back, wondering why he was being so stubborn. After all, they reasoned, what harm could come from hosting an occasional neighborhood swim day? Others, however, saw through Karen's tactics and found her behavior increasingly unreasonable. They admired Mark for standing his ground, even if it meant dealing with Karen's relentless pressure. But Karen wasn't content with just stirring up gossip. She decided to take her campaign to the next level by filing formal grievances against Mark on behalf of the HOA. These documents were filled with exaggerated claims and vague references to unwritten rules about neighborhood harmony and shared spaces. One grievance accused Mark of creating a visual disturbance because the sight of his pool from the street allegedly caused envy among other residents. Another claimed that his refusal to open the pool violated a non-existent clause requiring homeowners to contribute to community enrichment. Each time Mark received one of these letters, he felt a mix of frustration and disbelief. He couldn't believe Karen was willing to twist facts and fabricate rules just to justify her obsession with his backyard. Still, he handled the situation with patience and professionalism. With Lisa's help, he drafted detailed responses, citing specific sections of the HOA guidelines that clearly protected private pools from public access. He also reminded the board that he maintained the pool at his own expense and ensured it met all safety standards, a responsibility he took seriously for the sake of his family. Despite his efforts, Karen refused to let up. She began showing up at Mark's house more frequently, often unannounced, to deliver her grievances in person. On one particularly memorable occasion, she arrived holding a stack of papers and wearing a self-righteous expression. "Mark," she said, stepping onto his porch without waiting for an invitation, "I've been thinking, what if we compromise? You don't have to open your pool every weekend, just once a month. That's reasonable, isn't it?" Mark crossed his arms, trying to keep his temper in check. "Karen," he replied evenly, "this isn't a negotiation. My pool is private property, and I'm not changing my mind. If you want to host a community event, there are plenty of public parks and facilities available." Karen's smile faltered for a moment, but she quickly recovered. "Well, fine," she said, her tone laced with sarcasm. "If you're going to be so selfish about it, maybe the rest of us will just have to find another way to enjoy ourselves." With that, she turned and marched off, leaving Mark shaking his head in exasperation. As the weeks went by, Karen's antics became more extreme. She started organizing petitions, knocking on doors throughout the neighborhood to gather signatures from anyone willing to support her cause. Some neighbors signed out of fear of crossing her, while others did so because they genuinely believed Mark should share his pool. A small group of holdouts, including a few close friends of the Thompsons, refused to participate, but Karen dismissed them as irrelevant. One evening, after yet another exhausting encounter with Karen, Mark joined Lisa in the kitchen. The kids were upstairs doing homework, and the house was unusually quiet. "I don't know how much longer I can deal with this," Mark admitted, running a hand through his hair. She's driving me crazy. Lisa leaned against the counter, her arms folded. You're doing the right thing, she said firmly. This is our home, and no one has the right to dictate how we use it. But maybe we need to get creative. Mark raised an eyebrow. Creative? What do you mean? Lisa hesitated for a moment, then smiled mischievously. I overheard someone at the grocery store talking about how funny it would be if you installed a coin-operated gate to get into the backyard. Like, if Karen wants your pool to be public, why not charge admission? Mark stared at her for a second, then burst out laughing. You're joking, right? Not really, Lisa replied, her grin widening. Think about it. If she's so obsessed with making your pool accessible to everyone, why not treat it like a business? Maybe it'll finally make her realize how ridiculous she's being. The idea was absurd, but also strangely appealing. Mark couldn't deny that it had a certain poetic justice to it. If Karen wanted him to turn his private oasis into a public attraction, why not go all the way? He spent the rest of the evening mulling it over, imagining the look on Karen's face if he actually followed through. The next day, Mark mentioned the idea to a couple of trusted neighbors during a casual chat. To his surprise, they loved it. Do it, one of them exclaimed, laughing. That'll teach her a lesson she won't forget. Even Lisa's skepticism faded as she saw how much the concept amused their friends. Encouraged by the positive reaction, Mark decided to move forward with the plan. Over the following weeks, he quietly arranged for the installation of a sleek metal gate at the entrance to his backyard. The gate featured a shiny coin slot mechanism, along with a small sign that read, "Private pool access, $5 per entry. All proceeds go toward maintaining this public amenity." He added the last part with a wink, knowing it would drive Karen absolutely mad. When the gate was finally in place, Mark stepped back to admire his handiwork. It was bold, it was clever, and most importantly, it sent a clear message. He wasn't backing down. Little did he know, this decision would spark a chain reaction that would leave the entire neighborhood talking, and force Karen to confront the consequences of her relentless crusade. The day Mark installed the coin-operated gate, the neighborhood buzzed with curiosity. Word spread quickly. How could it not? The shiny metal gate stood out like a beacon, its polished surface gleaming in the sunlight. Above the coin slot, the small sign declaring private pool access $5 per entry caught everyone's attention. It was impossible to miss and even harder to ignore. Neighbors walking by stopped to read it, some chuckling quietly, others shaking their heads in disbelief. Karen, of course, was among the first to notice. She had been watching Mark's house closely ever since her last confrontation with him, waiting for any sign of weakness or compromise. When she spotted the gate from across the street, her jaw dropped. For a moment, she just stared, frozen in place, as if trying to process what she was seeing. Then, her face turned red with anger, and she stormed over to Mark's front door. Mark was outside when Karen arrived, pretending to inspect the gate as though he hadn't noticed her approach. He knew exactly what was coming, but he couldn't resist savoring the moment. As Karen marched up the driveway, her heels clicking sharply against the pavement, he turned to greet her with a calm, almost amused expression. "What is this?" Karen demanded, pointing at the gate. Her voice was shrill, cutting through the quiet afternoon air. "This is outrageous. You can't charge people to use your pool." Mark raised an eyebrow, feigning confusion. "Charge people? Oh, you must be mistaken. This is a private pool, remember? I'm just ensuring that anyone who uses it contributes to its upkeep. After all, maintaining a pool isn't cheap," Karen spluttered, clearly unprepared for his response. But this is ridiculous. You're mocking me. This is harassment." "Harassment?" Mark repeated innocently. "I'm simply following your logic, Karen. If my pool is supposed to be public property, then it makes sense to treat it like one. Public pools usually charge fees, don't they? Seems fair, doesn't it?" Karen clenched her fists, visibly struggling to keep her composure. "You're twisting everything around. That's not what I meant, and you know it." Mark shrugged, still playing the part of the reasonable homeowner. "Well, maybe you should have thought about that before insisting my pool belongs to everyone. If you want it to be public, then let's make it official. $5 gets you in. All proceeds go toward maintenance, chemicals, and repairs. Fair enough? Karen glared at him, her lips pressed into a thin line. She opened her mouth to argue further, but seemed to realize she had no solid ground to stand on. Instead, she snapped, "This isn't over, Mark. You'll regret this," before spinning on her heel and marching back to her house. A new kind of attention as the days passed. The coin-operated gate became the talk of the neighborhood. Some residents found it hilarious, while others thought it was a bit much. But one thing was certain: it worked. The gate effectively kept unwanted visitors out, which was precisely what Mark had intended. However, it also attracted a different kind of attention: people who were curious enough to pay the $5 fee just to see what all the fuss was about. One Saturday afternoon, Mark and Lisa were relaxing by the pool when they heard the familiar clink of coins dropping into the slot. They exchanged amused glances as a young couple walked through the gate, looking around with wide eyes. "Wow, this really is nice," the woman said, shielding her eyes from the sun as she took in the lush landscaping and sparkling water. "Totally worth $5. Mark waved casually from his lounge chair. "Welcome. Enjoy your swim," he called out, suppressing a grin. The couple hesitated for a moment, unsure whether he was serious, but eventually they dipped their toes into the water and settled in. Over the next few weeks, more neighbors began paying to use the pool. Most came out of curiosity, eager to experience the drama firsthand. Some even admitted that they'd never realized how beautiful Mark's backyard truly was. Others treated it like a novelty, a quirky attraction that added a touch of humor to their otherwise mundane weekends. Mark didn't mind. In fact, he found the whole situation oddly entertaining. Lisa, however, wasn't entirely convinced. One evening, as they sat together on the patio watching the sunset, she brought up her concerns. "Do you think this is going too far?" she asked, her brow furrowed. "I mean, we did this to prove a point, but now it feels like, I don't know, like we're actually running a business." Mark nodded thoughtfully. "I get what you're saying, but honestly, it's better than letting Karen dictate how we live our lives. Besides, it's not like we're forcing anyone to come here. People are choosing to pay because they want to see what all the hype is about, and hey, if they enjoy it, that's great. If not, they won't come back." Lisa sighed, leaning her head on his shoulder. "I guess you're right. Still, it's weird having strangers in our backyard. What happens if Karen tries to make an issue out of this?" "She already has," Mark replied dryly. "But unless she can prove that charging for access violates some obscure HOA rule, which it doesn't, I think we're fine. Honestly, I think she's starting to realize she picked the wrong fight." Karen's growing obsession. Meanwhile, Karen was spiraling deeper into frustration. Every time she saw someone entering Mark's backyard through the gate, it felt like a personal insult. She couldn't understand why anyone would willingly pay to use his pool instead of siding with her. To her, it was proof that Mark was manipulating the situation to humiliate her. Her obsession reached new heights when she started documenting every detail about the gate and its users. She snapped photos of the sign, jotted down notes whenever she saw someone paying the fee, and even tried to interview neighbors about their opinions. Her ultimate goal was to gather enough evidence to take Mark to the HOA board, or failing that, to file a formal complaint with the city. But the more she pushed, the more isolated she became. Many neighbors grew tired of her constant meddling and began avoiding her altogether. Even those who had initially supported her cause started to distance themselves, realizing that her vendetta against Mark was less about community spirit and more about control. A few even admitted privately that they admired Mark's creativity and wished they'd had the guts to stand up to Karen sooner. Despite the growing backlash, Karen refused to admit defeat. She convinced herself that she was fighting for justice, that Mark's actions were a direct attack on the principles of fairness and equality. In her mind, the coin-operated gate wasn't just a clever prank, it was a declaration of war. And Karen Miller did not back down from a fight. An unexpected side effect. While Karen plotted her next move, Mark and Lisa discovered an unexpected benefit of the gate. It brought them closer to certain neighbors. Some of the visitors who paid to use the pool ended up sticking around for friendly conversations, sharing stories and laughter over snacks and drinks. Mark and Lisa realized that many of these people weren't so different from them. They valued kindness and respect, qualities Karen sorely lacked. One neighbor, a retired teacher named Mrs. Henderson, became a regular visitor. She loved sitting by the pool with a book, enjoying the peaceful atmosphere. "You've created such a lovely space here," she told Mark one afternoon. "It's inspiring. Maybe someday I'll convince my husband to put in a pool of our own." Mark laughed. "If you do, let me know. I'll give you tips on how to avoid turning it into a neighborhood battleground." Mrs. Henderson chuckled. "Oh, don't worry. I've learned my lesson from watching you two. Sometimes standing your ground is the best way to keep the peace." As the weeks went by, Mark and Lisa began to feel a renewed sense of pride in their home and in their decision to install the gate. It had started as a way to protect their privacy, but it had evolved into something more, a symbol of resilience, humor, and the importance of setting boundaries. And though Karen remained a thorn in their side, they knew they had the support of the people who truly mattered, their family, their friends, and the neighbors who respected their right to live life on their own terms. The coin-operated gate had become more than just a clever solution to Karen's relentless demands. It had transformed into a lightning rod for opinions and emotions across the neighborhood. As word of Mark's bold move spread beyond their immediate community, it sparked debates that spilled over into HOA meetings, backyard barbecues, and even online chat groups. The Thompsons' once private pool was now at the center of a heated divide, with neighbors taking sides in ways no one could have predicted. At the heart of the controversy was Karen herself, whose indignation knew no bounds. She viewed the gate as a personal affront, a deliberate attempt by Mark to humiliate her and undermine her authority. Her obsession with controlling the situation only grew stronger, fueling late-night rants and increasingly aggressive actions. To Karen, the $5 fee wasn't just about money. It was proof that Mark was mocking her, and she couldn't let that stand. Neighbors take sides as tensions escalated. The neighborhood split into two camps, those who supported Mark and those who sympathized with Karen. The division played out in subtle but unmistakable ways. At the grocery store, casual conversations turned into awkward exchanges when neighbors realized they were on opposing sides. Social media threads erupted with arguments, emojis flying back and forth as people debated whether Mark's actions were justified or petty. Even the local coffee shop became a battleground, with patrons whispering about the latest developments over lattes and muffins. On one side stood Mark's supporters, many of whom admired his ingenuity and determination to defend his property rights. They saw the gate as a humorous yet effective way to shut down Karen's unreasonable demands. "If Karen thinks the pool should be public, then paying to use it is only fair," said Mr. Patel, a retired engineer who lived down the street. "Mark's not doing anything wrong. He's just protecting his family." Others echoed similar sentiments. Some even joked that they'd gladly pay the $5 fee just to see Karen squirm. A few neighbors started referring to the pool as the best show in town, drawing parallels between Mark's standoff with Karen and a reality TV drama. One teenager even created a meme featuring Mark as a superhero standing guard by the gate, captioned, "When life gives you lemons, charge admission." But not everyone was amused. On the other side of the debate were Karen's allies, or more accurately, the people too afraid to cross her. These neighbors worried that opposing Karen would invite retaliation or social ostracism. While some genuinely believed Mark's gate was excessive, others simply didn't want to risk being targeted themselves. Mrs. Dawson, an elderly widow known for keeping to herself, summed up this perspective during a tense HOA meeting. "I understand why Mark put up the gate," she began hesitantly, glancing nervously at Karen. "But I also think we need to remember that this is a community. Maybe there's a better way to resolve this without turning everything into a spectacle." Her comment drew mixed reactions. Some nodded in agreement while others rolled their eyes, clearly frustrated by what they perceived as cowardice. The room buzzed with murmurs, each side digging in deeper as tempers flared. By the end of the meeting, nothing had been resolved, but the rift between neighbors was wider than ever. Karen strikes back, determined to regain control. Karen launched a counteroffensive. She drafted a formal petition demanding that the HOA step in and declare Mark's gate illegal. According to her, the gate violated multiple clauses in the association's guidelines, including vague references to aesthetic consistency and neighborly conduct. She circulated the document door to door, pressing neighbors to sign despite their reluctance. "Think about it," she urged, holding the clipboard like a weapon. "This isn't about Mark, it's about setting a precedent. If he can get away with this, what's next? Will someone install toll booths on their driveways? Start charging for parking spaces? We can't let this kind of behavior go unchecked." Her arguments fell flat with most residents, but a small group signed anyway, either out of fear or apathy. Armed with their signatures, Karen presented the petition to the HOA board, confident that she finally had the ammunition she needed to bring Mark to heel. To her dismay, the board rejected her claims outright. After reviewing the guidelines, they confirmed that Mark's gate did not violate any existing rules. In fact, one member pointed out that Karen's own complaints had inadvertently highlighted the absurdity of her position. If Mark's pool is private property, and it is, then he has every right to decide how it's used, the board president stated firmly. Installing a gate doesn't change that. Humiliated but undeterred, Karen refused to back down. She began filing additional grievances, accusing Mark of creating a hostile environment and harassing neighbors with his gate. Each complaint was dismissed, further eroding her credibility. Yet instead of accepting defeat, Karen doubled down, vowing to take the matter to higher authorities if necessary. An unexpected twist amid the chaos, something surprising happened. The coin-operated gate started gaining popularity, not just locally, but beyond. A neighbor snapped a photo of the sign and posted it online, where it quickly went viral. Comments poured in from strangers across the country, praising Mark's creativity and humor. Some called him a hero for standing up to entitled behavior, while others joked that they wished they'd thought of the idea first. Local news outlets picked up the story, dubbing it the Great Pool Gate Debate. Reporters flocked to the neighborhood, eager to interview Mark and Karen about their ongoing feud. While Mark politely declined interviews, citing a desire to keep the focus on his family, Karen seized the opportunity to air her grievances on camera. Clutching her clipboard and wearing a look of righteous indignation, she declared, "This isn't about me. It's about fairness. Everyone deserves equal access to amenities like pools." Her comments sparked laughter and ridicule, online with memes and parodies flooding social media. One particularly popular video featured a comedian pretending to set up a coin-operated gate outside their own home, complete with a sign reading, "Public opinion access, $5 per rant." Another parody showed Karen storming through various fictional scenarios demanding free access to everything from private yachts to luxury hotel rooms. While Karen basked in the fleeting attention, Mark remained unfazed. He continued going about his daily life, treating the gate as little more than a practical joke. When curious visitors arrived to use the pool, he welcomed them warmly, making light of the situation. "Welcome to the public pool," he'd say with a wink. "Just don't forget your quarters." A community divided. Despite the humor, the neighborhood remained divided. For every person who laughed at Karen's expense, another felt uneasy about the growing animosity. Friendships frayed, and long-standing alliances crumbled under the weight of the dispute. Even holiday gatherings became awkward affairs, with guests tiptoeing around the topic to avoid conflict. Some neighbors tried to mediate, suggesting compromises that might restore peace. One proposal involved organizing a community fundraiser to build a shared pool at the nearby park, a solution that would satisfy Karen's desire for public access without infringing on Mark's property rights. But Karen dismissed the idea, insisting that Mark's pool was the only acceptable option. As weeks turned into months, it became clear that Karen's fixation on the issue was consuming her. She spent hours poring over legal documents, searching for loopholes that might allow her to challenge Mark's gate. She attended every HOA meeting, bombarding the board with new grievances and accusations. Her single-minded pursuit left little room for anything else, straining her relationships with her own family and friends. Meanwhile, Mark and Lisa focused on maintaining their sanity and their sense of humor. They hosted impromptu pool parties for close friends, turning the controversy into a source of entertainment rather than stress. Their children, Emma and Jake, adapted surprisingly well, using the situation as material for school projects and storytelling assignments. "My dad built a gate to keep HOA Karen out," Jake proudly told his classmates during show and tell. "It's like a real-life video game." Though the battle showed no signs of ending anytime soon, Mark and Lisa found solace in knowing they had done everything they could to protect their home. And deep down, they suspected that Karen's relentless crusade might eventually lead to her undoing. After all, sometimes the best way to win a fight is to let your opponent dig their own hole. The final chapter of the pool saga unfolded in a way that no one could have predicted. What had started as a neighborhood squabble over property rights and public access spiraled into a full-blown legal battle, with Karen taking her crusade to the courts. It was a move that shocked even her closest allies, or what remained of them, and marked the beginning of the end for her relentless campaign. Karen's last stand, frustrated by the HOA's repeated rejections of her complaints, Karen decided to escalate matters by filing a lawsuit against Mark. She claimed that his coin-operated gate violated unspecified HOA regulations and constituted harassment. In her mind, this was her last chance to assert control and force Mark to comply with her demands. Armed with stacks of documents, photographs, and witness statements, many of which were questionable at best, she marched into small claims court, determined to emerge victorious. Mark, on the other hand, approached the situation with calm confidence. He knew he had done nothing wrong and was prepared to defend his actions with facts and logic. With Lisa's support, he gathered all relevant paperwork, including copies of the HOA guidelines, receipts for pool maintenance, and correspondence with Karen. They also enlisted the help of a lawyer recommended by a neighbor, who agreed to represent them pro bono after hearing about the absurdity of the case. On the day of the trial, the courtroom was packed, not just with neighbors curious to see how things would play out, but also reporters eager to cover the now infamous Poolgate story. Cameras clicked, pens scribbled, and whispers filled the air as both parties took their seats. Karen entered wearing an outfit clearly chosen for maximum impact, a sharp blazer paired with oversized glasses meant to convey authority. Mark, dressed simply in slacks and a button-down shirt, looked relaxed and composed, exchanging quiet smiles with Lisa. When the judge called the court to order, Karen wasted no time launching into her argument. She spoke passionately about fairness, community spirit, and the importance of shared resources. "Your Honor," she declared, pacing dramatically in front of the bench, "this isn't just about a pool. It's about setting a precedent. If we allow homeowners to install gates and charge fees for something visible from public spaces, where will it end? Will we live in a world where every amenity is privatized?" The judge listened patiently, nodding occasionally as Karen continued her tirade. But when it was Mark's turn to speak, the tone of the proceedings shifted entirely. His lawyer presented a meticulously organized case, citing specific sections of the HOA guidelines that protected private pools from public access. He emphasized that Mark had followed all rules and maintained his property responsibly, while Karen's accusations lacked any legal basis. Furthermore, the lawyer added, gesturing toward the stack of grievances Karen had filed, "My client has been subjected to months of harassment and baseless claims. Rather than fostering community harmony, Ms. Miller's actions have caused division and unrest among neighbors." Mark then took the stand, speaking directly to the judge. His voice was steady, his words measured. "I love my neighborhood," he began. "I've lived here for years, raised my kids here, and worked hard to create a home that reflects our values. The pool is part of that. It's a place where my family can relax and spend time together. I never imagined I'd have to fight so hard just to keep it private. Installing the gate wasn't about retaliation. It was about protecting my family's peace of mind." By the time Mark finished, the atmosphere in the courtroom had shifted. The judge leaned back in his chair, studying Karen thoughtfully before delivering his verdict. The verdict, after a brief deliberation, the judge ruled decisively in Mark's favor. He dismissed Karen's lawsuit, stating that her claims were unfounded and unsupported by evidence. Furthermore, he ordered her to pay Mark's legal fees, a ruling that elicited audible gasps from the gallery. Addressing Karen directly, the judge added, "Ms. Miller, your behavior throughout this ordeal has been excessive and disruptive. Homeowners have the right to determine how their properties are used, provided they adhere to established rules. Attempting to impose your will on others does not serve the interests of justice or community." For Karen, the verdict was devastating. As she left the courtroom, head bowed and shoulders slumped, the reality of her defeat sank in. Not only had she lost the case, but her reputation in the neighborhood was irreparably damaged. Neighbors who had once tolerated her antics now openly criticized her, labeling her actions as selfish and unreasonable. Within weeks, she stepped down as HOA president, citing personal reasons, though everyone knew the truth. A return to normalcy. With the lawsuit behind them, life in the Thompson household slowly returned to normal. Mark removed the coin-operated gate shortly after the trial, explaining that its purpose had been served. "It was fun while it lasted," he joked during a casual chat with a neighbor, "but honestly, I'm glad to put this whole thing behind us." The pool once again became a private sanctuary, free from prying eyes and unwelcome visitors. Family dinners resumed, laughter echoed through the backyard, and weekend swims felt peaceful once more. Emma and Jake celebrated their dad's victory, with handmade signs reading "Best Dad Ever" and "Pool Defender Supreme." As for the neighborhood, the drama brought unexpected changes. Many residents grew closer as a result of the ordeal, bonding over shared experiences and mutual respect for Mark's resilience. Mrs. Henderson, the retired teacher, hosted a small gathering to thank Mark and Lisa for standing up to Karen. "You reminded us all that it's okay to set boundaries," she said, raising a glass of lemonade. "Here's to finding peace and keeping our pools private." Other neighbors took the opportunity to reflect on the importance of kindness and cooperation. A few even formed a committee to organize regular events at the local park, aiming to foster genuine community spirit without infringing on individual rights. While some rifts lingered, particularly among Karen's remaining supporters, the overall mood improved significantly. Karen's redemption arc. Surprisingly, Karen didn't disappear entirely from the neighborhood scene. After stepping down as HOA president, she retreated into relative obscurity, avoiding most social interactions. For months, she kept to herself, tending to her garden and avoiding eye contact with neighbors. Some speculated that she regretted her actions, while others assumed she was plotting her next move. Then one spring morning, something remarkable happened. Karen showed up at Mark's door carrying a plate of freshly baked cookies. Her expression was hesitant, almost sheepish, as she handed the plate to Lisa. I wanted to apologize," she stammered, avoiding their gaze. "I realize now that I went too far. The pool was never the issue. It was me. I got caught up in trying to control things, and I hurt a lot of people along the way." Lisa glanced at Mark, who nodded slightly. "Thank you for saying that," Lisa replied gently. "We appreciate the gesture." Karen hesitated, then added, "If there's ever anything I can do to make amends, please let me know. Maybe someday we can start fresh." While forgiveness didn't come instantly, Mark and Lisa acknowledged that Karen's apology was a step in the right direction. Time. They noticed subtle changes in her behavior. She became quieter, less confrontational, and more willing to listen. Though trust would take longer to rebuild, the ice had begun to thaw. Lessons learned in the end, the pool saga taught everyone valuable lessons about boundaries, respect, and the importance of minding your own business. Mark's decision to install the coin-operated gate may have started as a joke, but it ultimately highlighted the absurdity of Karen's demands. It also reminded the neighborhood that humor and creativity can be powerful tools in resolving conflicts. For Mark and his family, the experience reinforced their belief in standing firm against injustice, even when faced with overwhelming opposition. For the community, it underscored the value of open communication and mutual understanding. And for Karen, it served as a humbling reminder that sometimes letting go of control is the first step toward healing. Years later, when newcomers asked about the infamous pool gate, Mark would chuckle and shake his head. "It's a long story," he'd say with a grin. "Let's just say we learned that not everything worth fighting for requires a coin slot."